So we're going to begin. We're reviewing 10.1. Almost everything we learned about 10.1 is on this screen. The first thing that we learned was the parts of a circle. You will have that on your test when you're tested over circles. That is on March 14th, so it is about a month away. So, what I would do, we're going to talk about these. We learned about lines of a circle, and then we learned about segments of a circle. So we're going to go through and name them. There were two types of lines. With a raised hand, what was the first type of line we learned? Remember, lines go infinitely in both directions. Anna. That was a segment. A what? A secant. And what was the second, Miles?
A tangent.
Tangent. Perfect. All right, so we learned those were lines. They go infinitely in both directions. Then we learned about segments. What is one of the segments that we learned?
Diameter.
Thank you, diameter. We did learn about a radius. And the last one is a chord. All right, so we're going to look at this circle. I'm going to ask you to tell me which color. All right, so this one is brown. We're just going to call it brown because this one is red. And then after that, you can hopefully see the colors. So, let's start with this ugly brown one.
Tangent.
Why is it a tangent line?
Because it has a point on the line and it's an infinite.
It's a line. It goes infinitely both directions. And how many times does it touch a circle?
Once.
And it is perpendicular. Look at that. Good call. Next one. What is this green line called? Green segment. It is a chord. What about the red?
Diameter.
The diameter. What about the blue?
Radius.
Radius. And then the last one, orange, yellow. The secant. How many times does a secant touch a circle?
Twice.
All right. The diameter and the radius have a special relationship. If you cut the diameter in half, it would also be a radius. Okay, just so y'all know. We learned about a problem that looked like this. It says JH is tangent to circle L at H, and JK is tangent to circle L at K. I see. Find the value of X. Yes, when two external tangents come together at one point, they are congruent to each other. We're not going to finish the problem, just going to show you how to set it up. You would set them equal and then solve for X. All right? The last that we learned dealt with, is this a tangent line? Something had to happen between the tangent line and the radius, and what was it? What did they have to be?
You had to
cut it in half.
Yeah,
the radius
split
is
it.
half.
Nope. The tangent line and the radius have to be perpendicular. 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 All right, so the line in question is ST. So ST would have to be perpendicular to the radius. What is the radius in this picture?
24.
Which is PT. So they'd have to make a right angle together. So how can I prove that there's a right angle here?
Pythagorean theorem.
The Pythagorean theorem. Take out your calculators because you're about to do it.
Hey.
Which of these is the hypotenuse?
It's a 51.
51, so that'd be C. So plug it in your calculator because I'm not plugging it in mine. And you can write it on your paper. What is 44 squared plus 24 squared? 12.
12.
And then what is 51 squared?
2601.
Are these two equal?
No.
So is this a right triangle?
It is not a right triangle.
So that's not a right angle, so they are not tangent to each other. So it's a no. This is 10.1. Today, we're going to start on factoring. Here is why. You're going to be given a problem that looks like the top. So it'll be a circle, two lines coming out. Can you stop clicking? But instead of something as simple as this, it would say like x squared minus 4x and 5. It's the same property. You just need to solve a little bit differently. So we're going to review how to factor and how to solve with factoring. Okay? So here's what we're going to stop on for a second. This is what we did yesterday. We FOILed. Y'all remember this part? We did first, outer, inner, last. And our answer looked like x squared plus 3x minus 18, right? Today we are going to do the opposite. We are going to be given the right side, and we're going to solve for the left side. So your answer is going to end up looking something like this or like this, okay? It's not difficult if you just walk with my notes. They're opposites of each other. Here's why. What were the directions when you had to FOIL and they were not to FOIL? What were they? What did it say? Find the product. Because product means multiplication. Your directions here are going to be find the factors. That's dividing. Finding a factor is dividing. Finding a product is multiplying. So these two are opposites of each other. The reason I say this is because sometimes students, they'll FOIL or something. So they'll do this part. So x times x is x squared. Outer 9x minus 1x plus 9.
Do you expect us to draw those arrows and stuff?
No, I'm just trying to prove a point to you. So look, listen. Look at what's on the screen. So all I did was FOIL, and I got this answer, correct? So a lot of times students are like, do I factor it again? But you would be undoing what you just did. Or they'll factor this, and they'll get this, and then they'll say, do I FOIL it again? But you would literally be undoing what you just did. Do you see what I'm saying? So if it says to find the product, that is all you're doing. If it says to find the factors, that's all you're doing. You're not going to do two things. You're going to either factor or FOIL, one or the other. And 90% of the time in this section, you're going to actually factor. There is one particular method that we use. If you are in Algebra 2, you've already done this method. If you are not, then you will do this method. I want you to first write down ax squared plus bx plus c. Ax squared plus bx plus c. Clayton, can you pull your hood down too? You sure did, so we're going to review it this year. Because it is very important to the PERT test. Alright, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to draw an X. Alright, A, B, and C represent numbers. So if you look at the example I gave you, I know it's a smaller example. It says x squared plus 6x plus 5. All of the numbers in front of the letters, those represent A, B, and C. So A will be the number that's in front of x squared. What number is invisibly in front of x squared?
1.
All right. So B, what number is in front of x? 6. And then the freestanding number is going to be C, which is 5. So here's where you're going to put them in this X method. Be thankful that you have this. When I was in high school, we had this method, and it was called trial and error. And it was the most awful thing I've ever done in my life. I was so mad they had not made this. You literally wrote out the factors, and then you plugged it in, and then you FOILed. And then if that didn't work, you tried a new one. You plugged it in, and then you FOILed. And if that didn't work,
I know them tests took those.
it was so annoying. Okay? So, be grateful you have this. This is a great way for you to be able to visualize what you're doing. In the top, you're going to put B. I was in your shoes over 10 years ago, so no, that was not a couple years ago. Thank you, though. B goes in the top of the X.
B will always be at the top of that.
B will always be in the top of the X. So we're going to do this example on the right. So B, what did we say was B?
6.
6. So in this example, 6 would go in the top of the X. In the bottom, you're going to do A times C. A lot of people forget that it's A times C. And tomorrow, you're going to really need A times C. Okay? In our example on the right, what is A? 1 times 5, which is C. What's 1 times 5? 5. Okay, so that one is easy. Tomorrow, your A will not be 1. It'll be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Okay, so don't forget A times C goes in the bottom. So here's what you're going to do once you have set this up. You're going to find factors of the number on the bottom. Factors are two numbers that multiply together. So like factors of 6. 1 times 6 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. There are no other factors. So you're going to do that on the bottom. So factors of the bottom have to add up to the top. All right, so we are going to do our example. I'm going to erase so that they can see on my iPad. All right, so we're going to do our right example. So we said A is 1, B is 6, C is 5. 6 goes in the top, 1 times 5, so 5 goes in the bottom. So you always start with the number 1. 1 goes into 5 how many times? 5. Does 2 go into 5? No. Does 3 go into 5?
No.
Does 4? No. And 5 times 1 is already written there. So what you do, you find factors of the bottom that add up to the top. So these are the only factors. Does 1 plus 5 equal 6?
Yes.
Yes. So those are the two factors that you will be able to use. So here's what your final answer will look like. You'll write 2 sets of parentheses. X and X. All right, after that, we have a positive 1. And we have positive 5. And that's the answer. You don't refoil it, because if you foiled it, you would get this again, and your answer needs to look like this.
You can
Okay?
just check it if you want to.
If you want to check it, you can foil it. That's a good idea.
So where the 1 times 5 at the bottom go? Where that come
Like
from?
this. These are the factors of 5.
So you write all
So you start with 1. How many times does 1 go into the number? How many times does 2 go into the number? How many times does 3 go into the number? You keep going.
More factors, you just keep writing.
Yeah, you would keep writing them. I just did this one because I'm going to show you some shortcuts that you can think about to help you out with these. Yes, sir.
I think I touched it.
You had your hands. You're good? All right. We already did that. So here is what I want you to write. Okay, specifically this. I know that you wrote something very similar to this, but I want you to write ax squared. This is called plus and minus. That means a plus could be there, a minus could be there.
Positive, negative.
It's called positive, negative, yes. bx plus c. There's a very special reason why I'm asking you to write this. If you have a highlighter, highlighters are great during this part. This is the way that I kind of made a shortcut, and also a way that you can help check your answers without having to foil them every single time. So when you look at this, the very first thing that you want to look at are the signs, meaning these positives or negatives. You want to look at the second sign first. If this second sign, the one that's in front of the freestanding number, if it is positive, both of the factors will be the same exact sign. So either they'll both be positive or both be negative. I want you to write that down. So if the second sign is positive, the factors will be the same sign. So what can you deduct about if the second sign is negative? They'll be opposite signs, so they'll be a positive and negative. But if the second sign is positive, both of them will be positive or both of them will be negative. The way that you figure out if they're both positive or both negative is the first sign. So it is a habit for me. I always look at the second sign. If it's positive, they're both going to be positive or both going to be negative. To figure out if they're both positive or both negative, you look at the first. And the first sign will tell you if they're both positive or both negative. Okay, and we're going to do 2 examples to show you. So, first thing you want to look at is the fact that the second sign on both of these are positive. That means when you go to do your factors, the signs of your factors will be the same exact sign. To figure out which one, you're going to look at the first sign. I'm just writing this because we know this is what our answers are going to end up looking like. So, for x squared minus 10x plus 24, we are going to do our x method. What will go on the top of the x? Negative 10, which is b. And then what goes in the bottom? 1 times 24, which is?
24.
24. So here's the thing. They have to be the same sign because we're talking about factors of 24, meaning we're talking about multiplication. In order to get a positive number down here, if one of these numbers were negative, it doesn't matter which one. What is a negative times a positive? A negative. So this would not work out. So they either have to both be positive or both be negative. So to figure out which, bless you, you want these two numbers to multiply to the bottom, but to also add up to the top. Is there any way for two positive numbers to add up to a negative number?
No.
No. So that is why this sign will tell you they're both going to end up being negative. So we're going to keep going with the factors. So how many times does negative 2 go into 24? 12 times. So we're going to do negative 12 because a negative times a negative will get us that 24. Then go to 3. How many times does 3 go into 24?
8.
8. What about 4? 6. Does 5 go in? No. And 6 we already have written right here. Do any of these add up to negative 10? Negative 4 and negative 6.
I thought they equal positive 10.
They do not. In multiplication, a negative times a negative is a positive. But in addition, negative plus a negative is a negative. Alright, so we're going to see the difference in the first one that we just did and the second one. What goes in the top of our x if we have x squared plus 11x plus 18? 11. What goes in the bottom? 8. Yeah, 1 times 18, so 18. Alright, so again, the bottom number is positive. That means they both need to be the same signs. Alright, so think about this. If I have a negative and a negative, will that add up to a positive? No. You need two positive numbers. So the easy way to know it is if both of them are positive, then both your factors are going to end up being positive. Just because of this one scenario. Alright, how many times does 2 go into 18? 9. 3 go in 18? 6. Does 4 go in? No. 5? No. And 6 already up there. Which of these add up to 11? 2 and 9. Try not to sound too enthusiastic, Mackenzie. Alright, so there you go. These would be your answers.
I think I got it.
Alright, so I did it to where the second sign was positive, so both of our factors have the same sign. When the second sign is negative, that is when students get the most wrong because of their signs. Okay, are there any questions on the screen before we move? Alright, so in this scenario, the second sign is negative. If the second sign is negative, then the two factors will be different signs. So one will be positive and one will be negative. And it does matter which one you make positive and which one you make negative. I've seen some of you factor, so I suggest that you write it down. Unless you're in Algebra 2, in which hopefully you know how to factor. Alright, so if the second sign is negative, the first one will tell you what the larger factor will be. So in these examples, our second sign is negative. And the first sign will tell us what the larger factors should be. Alright, so second sign, if it's negative, then the two factors will be different, a positive and a negative. Because a positive times a negative will get our C term to be negative. Our first example is x squared minus 5x minus 36. Our second sign is negative, so that means they're going to be different signs. So different. And the first sign is negative. That means the bigger factor will be negative. Is negative. So this will help us with our x factoring. What goes on the top of the x? Negative 5, yeah.
Wait, the bigger factor would be negative?
Yes. Okay, I'll show you why in a second. All right, and in the bottom, 1 times negative 36 is negative 36. So I'm just showing you this, and here is why. Okay? The first factor of 36 is 1 and 36. Okay? A positive times a positive, does that make a negative? No. A negative times a negative, does that make a negative? No. So obviously one of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive. But not only do these two numbers have to multiply the bottom, but they have to add up to the top. If, in this case, the smaller numbers were negative, what is 36 minus 1? 35. That's a positive number, correct?
See.
So if the bigger number is positive, your outcome will be positive. Do we want our outcome to be positive?
Oh.
We want it to be negative. So that is why the bigger number in this case has to be negative, because the b term is negative. So you keep going with your factors. How many times does 2 go into 36?
16.
Yeah,
18. How many times does 3 go in? 12. How many times does 4 go in? 9. And 6? 6. Yeah? Which of these add up to negative 5?
4 and negative
4 and negative 9. So your answer is x plus 4, x minus 9. You could also write it x minus 9, x plus 4. Since this is multiplication, it does not matter what order you write them in, but what does matter, you see how this is a positive 4? It needs to stay a positive 4. This is a negative 9, it needs to stay a negative 9. So if you rewrite it any which way, you need to make sure that the positive or the negative moves with it. Any questions on this example? All right. Next, what goes in the top of our x?
5.
5. What goes in the bottom?
Negative 6.
Negative 6. All right, so this is the one that most people get wrong. I absolutely need you to write it down. I had Algebra 2 students get it wrong last year because they did not pay attention to their signs. Are my signs going to be the same or different? Different. And the bigger factors should be positive. So you should have negative 1 and 6, negative 2 and 3. Which of these add up to 5? Negative 1 and 6. Here's why I say a lot of people get it wrong. What's 2 plus 3?
5.
5. Most students write 2x plus 2 times x plus 3. But that would not be correct because this says they're going to be different signs. If you had x plus 2 times x plus 3, you would end up with this. Is that the same thing with what we started with?
No.
No. So you have to make sure that your signs are correct. Okay? The correct signs would be minus 1 and 6, because minus 1 times 6 is negative 6. Minus 1 plus 6 is 5. So it all matches. So we get x minus 1, x plus 6. All right, any questions? Check our answers. It's okay.
Wait, is the first one x minus 2?
No. I'm literally going to check it with you. Focus. In the top of the x, you'd have 3. In the bottom, you'd have negative 18. So they're going to be different signs. And the bigger one's going to be positive. So negative 1 and 18, negative 2 and 9, negative 3 and 6. Which of these adds up to 3? Negative 3 and 6. So factored would be a minus 3, a plus 6. If you used x, it's really not a big deal. Yes? A plus 6, a minus 3. Literally the same answer. Because in multiplication, like if you do negative 3 times 6, or if you do 6 times negative 3, it's the same answer. All right, the second. In the top, you have negative 8. In the bottom you have 12. So are they going to be the same sign or different signs?
Same sign.
Same signs, and they're both going to be
Negative.
negative. So -1, -12, -2, -6, -3, -4. Which of these add up to -8?
-2, -6.
So x minus 2, x minus 6. Boom. All right, so we're going to move on to something else. I want you to write this down. If something is in front of x squared,
Wait, so
try dividing the GCF out with a raised hand. Can somebody tell me what GCF stands for? Tiffany.
Greatest common factor.
Greatest common factor. Greatest meaning the biggest, common meaning what they have in common, and factor meaning a number they're both divisible by. So the biggest number, all three are divisible by. So let me show you the biggest mistake I see. It drives me crazy. Someone will see this and they'll be like, oh, I can divide out a 4. Do all three of them have a 4 they're divisible by?
no.
No, because x squared
There's one.
is 1, not divisible by 4. Okay? These, all three of them are divisible by what number? 6. But listen to me here. Focus. This is an expression. It's not an equation. What would make this an equation?
Equal
Do you see an equal sign?
No.
No. So whenever you have an expression, you have to have an equivalence answer with what you started with. So you can't just throw out the 6 and never see it again. You have to write it on the outside of a parentheses. Because your answer should be equivalent to what you started with. Okay, we're not solving for anything. We're literally just dividing a bunch of stuff out. So divide each of these by 6. 6v squared divided by 6 is v squared. 66v divided by 6 is 11v. And then 60 divided by 6 is 10. Once you have divided out what you can, you're going to see that you still have 3 terms here. And you're going to see if you can use the x method on them. So you don't have to say anything. Just try it on your paper. Just write what I'm doing.
We don't need to distribute first.
Didn't we just undistribute? So if you distributed, you'd be undoing what you just did. We're going to use the x method on what is inside of the parentheses. So the b term goes on top. What is the b term here? 11. What is the a times c?
10.
So this is pretty easy. Are they going to be the same sign or different?
Same sign.
Same, and they're both going to be positive. So what are the factors of 10 that add up to 1?
1 times 10.
110. So you're going to get 6 times v plus 1 times v plus 10.
So, if you want to check your answer,
You could.
Just don't.
You can. You can do it any way you want to. You could FOIL first and then multiply by 6. You could distribute the 6 in and then FOIL that. Does not matter. Because it's multiplication, it doesn't matter what order you multiply in. Here's the last thing I want to emphasize to you. Okay? A lot of people think that factoring and the x method are the same thing. Factoring is literally just dividing. So just because you can't use the x method doesn't mean you can't factor. So on the left, if you look, you have 12x squared plus 6x. A lot of people would write, you can't factor this. You definitely can factor this. You just can't use the x method. To show you can't use the x method, what would go in the top of the x?
6.
6. What would go in the bottom?
There is nothing.
A times c would be 12 times 0, which would be 0. Are there factors of 0 that add up to 6? No. But factoring has so many methods. The AC method is just the most popular. You can factor out the GCF, and that is called factoring. Okay? So factoring out a GCF, you would look at these and see what number and letter do they have in common.
6.
They have 6 in common. They're both divisible by 6. And how many x's do they have in common? 1. So you're going to write x. This is still called factoring. It is just not the AC or the x method. All right, so when you divide something out, where do you put it? The outside. And then you would do, what is 12 divided by 6?
2x.
And then x squared divided by x is x. And then what is anything divided by itself? 1. All right.
So
These.
if
Go
you
ahead.
don't get 6x out there, that's wrong.
Yes. Because 2x plus 1 is not equivalent to what we started with. 6x times 2x plus 1, that is equivalent to what we started with. The second, is there a number we can divide out?
No. Oh, wait.
2. So you can divide out a 2, which would go on the outside. 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. 10x divided by 2 is 5x. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. So once you look at this, you see that you have 3 terms. All right, so we could see if we can use the x method. What would go on the top of the x?
5.
And in the bottom?
Negative 6.
So are my signs going to be the same or different? Different, and the bigger one will be positive. So negative 1 and 6, negative 2 and 3, which add up to 5.
Negative 1 and 6.
Perfect. So you have 2 times x minus 1 times x plus 6. All right. Factoring by the x method only works for trinomials. Trinomials means there's 3 terms. In the first problem, there were only 2 terms. Okay? In the second problem, there were 3 terms, but we could factor out a number first. All right? These are all the examples we did today. This is a flow chart I'll leave up. This is a thought process. You start with the second sign. Is it positive or negative? If it's positive, you follow these arrows. If it's negative, you follow these. If you already caught it on, you don't have to write it down. But if you get stuck and you don't know what to do, you have this. So here's what you're going to do.
I like that last food source.